This week on Head to Head, the Power of Costume exhibit at Detroit Institute of Arts.
You're listening to Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Two fans, two generations, all things Star Wars. Begins now.
Hello, everybody. I'm Eric Vancil.
And I'm Darryl Sanders.
And we're your hosts for this podcast. So I wanted to start out the show today, Darryl, by talking about one of the people who have actually been listening to our show by the name of Dave Cossey.
Okay.
And Dave actually wrote us a really, really nice email. He says, "Hey, Eric and Darryl, I'm on Season 1, Episode 2, and I'm hooked. I really appreciate the format of your show with different segments. Thanks for featuring my question, by the way." So, yeah, I mean, I think it's great that people are actually starting to write into the show, you know, because we're still relatively new.
Yeah, it's really cool. And Dave being a good friend of ours in the past, and I'm glad he's still following, keeping up with us, and he's enjoying the show. And that's really cool. And we would love to hear more from everybody else, and we can feature some of your email replies and definitely your questions.
Yeah, because, I mean, one of the things that I think is cool, you know, friends a lot of times could be your toughest critics.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, usually they're the ones that, you know, everybody else is into the show or into whatever you're doing, but your friends are the ones that tell you, like, everything that's wrong with it.
You suck.
So, yeah, exactly. So, I mean, to actually have some of your friends not only listen, but, you know, take the time to write to us and say, hey, I'm really into this. And
right, and he's actually willing to share the show, so that's awesome. So make sure you guys share the show as well.
Yeah, and if follow him, Dave Cossey. He's on Twitter and everything. I mean, he's really cool, really funny guy.
Well, I think I'm a little thirsty, man. So let's go head over to the Cantina.
You want to go to the Cantina? Let's go to the Cantina.
Today in the Cantina, we're going to talk about filming Episode 9. It's already begun, and Finn has a new costume.
Yeah, did you actually get a chance to see it?
Yeah, it kind of looks similar to like
I think it looks a lot like the Force Awakens one.
Yeah,
to me, anyway.
Yeah, but it kind of has like that old military look too, like an old Marine Corps type style. And then Poe Dameron actually has a new outfit. He kind of looks like a weird Indiana Jones in a way. So, so I think that's kind of cool. But I'm excited for the new costumes.
Well, yeah, I mean, one of the things that I thought was cool that struck me about the Finn one, besides the fact that it reminded me a little of The Force Awakens, was the fact that it kind of reminded me, actually, of the, what was it? The Bespin outfit of Han Solo.
Yeah. And and that's a cool thing about Star Wars, especially this new era of Star Wars, is that they're kind of mixing and mingling with people's looks and mannerisms. So there's Poe Dameron, who's kind of supposed to be the new Han Solo, but then you could kind of see some Han Solo traits in Finn as well.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like they're taking Han Solo and dividing him amongst different characters, or Luke Skywalker in different areas as well. So
that's actually a good point, because one of the things that I was afraid of with the new trilogy was that they were going to take the characters and almost make them mirrors of the original trilogy cast. Right. You know, and they haven't done that. Yeah,
and it's like they're kind of letting them be themselves with a little bit of the original characters that we know and love. So
yeah, because I mean that's important. Cool. I mean, I think that's vital. If the series is going to continue, they actually have to develop these people beyond just, you know, mirror templates of, like I said, the original cast. They have to grow, they have to develop, they have to be their own characters.
Now, if you're looking for these pictures, you can definitely check them out on StarWarsNews.net.
It's actually StarWarsNewsNet.com. It's such a tongue twister. I mean,
I'm sorry.
Every time. I mean, it took me forever to even figure that out. But yeah, those guys are actually really good. They break a lot of news. Mm-hmm. And, you know, they're great aggregators of news, so they take everything from around the internet, and it could be your one-stop shop for Star Wars news.
Yeah, but in the picture in which we're talking about, where we saw Finn and Poe's new outfit, there's also a new planet there, too, that it looks like it's a big, kind of like an older Naboo, in a way. It has like a lot of big grass fields and things like that. So I'm just kind of wondering what worlds are we going to see along with the new Star Wars movie.
Well, and another thing that you had mentioned earlier before we even started recording this show was the Knights of Ren.
Yeah.
You were wondering about that. I mean, I think we all
are really curious about that, because we've already kind of seen some things from Rey's little vision that she had in The Force Awakens, as far as that was being explained, like when Luke was touching R2-D2 after the temple burned down, and we kind of saw that in 8 with the whole Kylo Ren situation.
Well, the funny thing about the Knights of Ren to me is the fact that they made such a big deal about them in 7, not even so much just in the movie itself, because they they touched upon them, but really it was in the marketing and in talking about it. You just heard nothing but the Knights of Ren.
Right.
The trailer had it.
And then plus Kylo's name. His name is Kylo Ren. I mean, so it's like I need to see what that's about. I need to see who these dark characters are. And I think that we're going to see and hopefully see them in 9 because now with the First Order kind of being in disarray and from what we can tell, Kylo is really not a military guy. So he's going to need somebody that's going to combat the new resistance. And I think that's where you will bring in the Knights of Ren.
Yeah, because, I mean, I think one of the problems is, too, I think General Hux is going to create some issues.
Yeah, and he doesn't like Kylo.
No, and I mean, Kylo needs to have somebody around him. I mean, if you think about it, Palpatine had the Royal Guards.
Right.
Snoke
had almost like his version of them. Right.
So, the Praetorian Guards, I think, is what they were called.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, it seems like he has to have some force behind him. Just some, really, it's for show.
Yeah.
Because it's not, I mean, does anybody really think that Palpatine needed them? Although I heard early on that they did play an important role in protecting him.
Well, yeah, I mean, but there's a lot of things that, I guess when you're trying to run any type of organization, your mind's kind of on something else. And then the Force is one of those things where, you probably got everybody trying to come after you if you're Kylo Ren.
Yeah.
So he's going to need some extra eyes and some other people who are more Force sensitive to kind of seek things out before they happen and deal with them because he has a bigger fish to fry, and that's dealing with Rey.
Yeah, and that's why, I mean, I personally, like I said, I hope we see them. I think it's important that we see them. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot. I don't envy J.J. Abrams in this because, everybody wants to see pretty much everything in this movie.
Yeah, and he's got a lot of things to tie up in this. And I was listening to Christian Harloff on Jedi Council, and I do agree, like, we've seen a lot of the wars, but we haven't really seen much Force interaction or lightsaber duels and things like that. And I think that's something the fans are really itching to see, especially out of this new crop. So...
And especially after The Last Jedi, because The Last Jedi really did focus more on the war. I mean, it did have, in the case of Luke Skywalker and Rey, it did have Force stuff in the sense of you had Yoda, you had a lot of the different history in a way, you had a different viewpoint of the Jedi, even like where Luke was now. Yeah,
I mean, the whole explanation of what the Force actually is, I thought that was really dope.
Yeah, that was good.
And then, and you get to see like, I can see life and death and there and what's between it, and that explanation of the Force is really cool.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And then of course Kylo doing that whole thing to Snoke was pretty awesome.
Yeah,
how he completely tricked him about where his true intentions lie. That was pretty sweet.
Yeah, that was cool.
Well, what's our next topic?
Well, Kelly Marie Tran did an interview. She talked about, now if you remember some months ago, she closed down. I don't think she actually canceled her social media accounts, but she basically deactivated them, I think, and just pretty much swore off of social media, and then nobody really heard from her.
Mm-hmm.
And so what happened was she recently did an interview that she talked about why she left social media, and she gave this really bold statement.
Yeah.
That I thought was really, really cool.
Yeah, and we kind of touched upon this on another episode where we were talking about Ahmad Best and a lot of the flack and the things that he received from playing his character, of course, Jar Jar Binks. And a lot of people didn't like Rose's character in The Last Jedi. A lot of people may not have cared for her portrayal. But once again, she's an actress. She's only doing what the director, Rian Johnson, told her to do. So you can't really blame her. And we've talked about this before as far as, these are real people. And you don't have to like the character. You don't have to like the movie. But don't attack the actor or actress because they're only doing what they're paid to do.
Yeah, I mean, she, a couple of quotes from her, I won't be marginalized by online harassment. And I had been tricked into thinking that my body was not my own, that I was only beautiful if someone else believed it, regardless of my own opinion. And these are the kinds of things that these people are facing now in the age of social media. I mean, we see it all the time. You still work for a school district. I used to work for that school district. And we saw where, cyberbullying is a big thing, where it's no longer that you just, you leave school and you go home and, well, now you're safe. they could get you in your room now.
Yeah, I mean, then of course, you have people creating memes out of you, and some are funny and cool, but then sometimes can be just downright vicious and
very demeaning.
And very demeaning, yeah. And for this young woman of Asian descent to star in a Star Wars movie after the first one, it was the first male Asian actor in Rogue One. So Donnie Yen, so that's cool. So I mean, she's making some real headway in the Star Wars universe in movie cinema. And
yeah, I mean, it's very important that you have that representation and that she's leading the way in making these inroads. But aside from that, you also have situations where you have a girl who's just really excited to be in a Star Wars film.
Yeah.
She's all happy about it, And
then, she's living her best life out here.
And then all of a sudden, I mean, the thing that's funny is I would think that if I were in a Star Wars movie and I were chosen to be, and the directors are probably saying to these actors and actresses, oh, you're doing a great job. This is awesome. Right? So you come out feeling so good about yourself. And then everybody talks about how terrible you are. Or they even start some of the things that people said about her were just completely unnecessary and not even related to Star Wars.
Yeah, and the same thing was faced with John Boyega in Force Awakens. When they found out a black stormtrooper, and everybody was up in arms and didn't want to boycott the movie. I'm like, are you serious? Like, first of all, you couldn't even tell. I mean, it could have been 100 black guys in A New Hope. You never knew because they had helmets on, so you didn't know.
Well, I think the thing that's really hilarious is that everybody forgets that, in the Clone Wars, you had the clone, right? Jango Fett I think he was Asian. Tamir Morrison. He definitely wasn't a Caucasian guy.
Right.
So it's like, okay, the whole clones were based on essentially this minority character, and you're having a problem with a black stormtrooper. It's ridiculous.
Asinine, yeah, it's crazy.
And I don't understand why people just pick on the weirdest things. But that's one thing. I mean, they didn't. But the thing is, they did go after John Boyega a little bit, but I don't remember it being as vicious or anything as what happened to Ahmed Best or what happened to Kelly Marie Tran.
Yeah, I think once John Boyega's portrayal of Finn came through, he's very charming, very hilarious, and he really brought a lot to that character. Especially, it was a character that, of course, no one knew, so he was allowed to kind of create within that space. And Kelly Marie Tran, I believe we're going to see a lot more from her, definitely in 9, because we got a lot from her even in The Last Jedi. We saw her emotional side. We saw her side of commitment to the rebellion as far as stopping Finn. And then now, even at the very end of the movie, saving Finn and kind of even having a romantic
I thought
relationship. So, I mean, we're seeing different sides of this woman all in one movie that we just got introduced to. So I think that she can actually grow even in 9.
Well, the thing that I thought was cool about her character, I understand that a lot of people really didn't care for her character that much. And I mean, it was one of those things where I could have taken it or left it at a certain point. But the more that I saw the movie, I think on repeated viewings, you realize that this is the first character where she was just kind of almost like the custodian, in a building or something. And then she ends up being this really important. It was the first time where somebody who was more of a blue-collar worker in the universe rose up and wasn't somebody special. I mean, you could say the same thing about Luke Skywalker, but because of the whole farm boy thing, but he actually had a lineage.
And he had a purpose that he just wasn't aware of yet.
He just wasn't aware of it, exactly. But this is almost like, just some
random. I mean, it's like a background character who just suddenly came to the foreground, because how she even got involved really was because of her sister. Her sister was the bomber that died in the initial run in the beginning of the movie. And she felt that loss, and now she's seeing people trying to abandon the mission and abandon the resistance. And she's like, well, my sister died for this. So how dare you all all of a sudden turn coward on us.
And I think, and what's funny,
there's something about
and
that.
she's lecturing one of the main heroes. But what's funny about it is that even that hero wasn't really the hero, because here you have Finn, who has been trying to run away the whole time.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that it kind of shows a thread of, it's the most unlikely people sometimes in the world that has an impact on you that you don't see coming.
Exactly, because you have somebody like Rey, who is telling Finn the whole time, you're better than this, you have a destiny, you need to join us and everything.
Poe, did the same thing.
Poe did the same thing, but it was actually the Rose character that...
It's bringing the most out of
really, that were really sunk in. And she was somebody that wasn't necessarily what you would consider... She was like a worker bee, She wasn't somebody that was a hero of the resistance, so to speak. Her sister probably would have fit that role a little bit better.
And definitely after her passing, so now it's kind of a posthumous thing.
And these are the kinds of threads and just intricacies that if you really stop and think and just get past the fact that, hey, I was disappointed that I didn't get to see Luke in some epic lightsaber battle or something. There's a lot of brilliance in The Last Jedi that I think people are not really cluing in on.
There's a lot of meat. There's a lot of depth. There's a lot of lessons in this movie. There's a lot of, and it's a lot of mentoring in this movie. There's a lot of growing up that people have to do. And I think that's what this movie was trying to convey, was that everyone has to grow in some way, shape, or form. Rey had to grow. Poe, even Luke, who's this master, he still even had to have a lesson from his old former master. So everybody had to grow up.
Even Luke had to have
exactly.
a lesson.
So no one's exempt from growth. And I think that's one of the things that even Kylo had to get, grow past Snoke and all the other things that he's
True, he had to come into his own. I mean, I think you hit it there, that it's really about people discovering
who they really are,
and what they're capable of doing. And I mean, these are just a lot of the important things. And again, I think it gets lost in the fact that people focus so much on what they didn't get from the movie that they're not really opening their eyes and seeing all the stuff that's really there.
But that's kind of like life. A lot of times we worry about the things that we don't have. We see everybody on social media and their things about things that we don't have, and look at them. They have this, I don't. But you don't stop and realize the things that you really do have and you could be thankful for. And there's a lot of things that mean something to you if you just stop and look at it.
Well, I hope she comes back to social media. I really do. And, speaking of which, we are on social media, everybody.
Absolutely.
You can find us at Head to Head SW on Twitter and Facebook. And remember, we want you to submit questions to us because, like I said, this podcast is fairly new. So we know that there's not a whole lot of listeners at the moment, but anybody that's listening to this and is enjoying it, submit questions, submit topics. We'd be glad to talk about anything that you want to talk
even
about.
Just your comments of what you think of the show so far, or just comments about Star Wars. And, we just like to talk about any and everything dealing with Star Wars. So
yeah, well, you know what? The next thing that we got to talk about is a new trailer for Star Wars Resistance.
Yes, speaking of new. So I got a chance to check that out. Did you?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I got a chance to check it out. I thought it was cool. I still am not really entirely sure what my opinion is yet. Yeah,
in the 1 minute trailer that they had, what I got from it was it's definitely more catered to little kids.
Absolutely.
Especially with the animation and just the type of jokes and things you kind of saw going on. It kind of, to me, it kind of looks like
Here we go.
Yeah, and I know everybody had the whole issue with Episode 7 being a rehash. I feel like this is a rehash of Rebels. Because it just, from what I can see, seems like the same thread is right there.
It kind of reminds me of how Rebels was in the first few episodes.
Mm-hmm.
It had that, because I remember when you and I first watched Rebels, we weren't really sure we were going to continue watching it.
Yeah.
Because we're like, it's kind of a kid's show.
Yeah, it's kind of, it's a cartoon, but it's a little...
Well, it's more of a cartoon than an animated series. There's definitely a difference. Yeah, it's a very fine line. I mean, it sounds like you're splitting hairs, but in reality, one caters to kids, one is more of
teen, teen, maybe
even
young adult type.
Sure.
Young adult, and that could be up to 22, 23 years old. because there's a lot of different things that Rebels handled that was very heavy. You dealt with loss. You dealt with some really hard portrayal. You dealt with people losing their families. And so there's a little bit more weight and gravity to Rebels as it went on.
Well, I actually think that what happened with Rebels is very similar to what happened with Clone Wars. Mm-hmm. It got a little bit more serious
as time went on,
a little bbit darker. Now, of course, Clone Wars went a little bit longer than Rebels did, not by much. I mean, it went 1.5, let's say, extra seasons. Mm-hmm. And, of course, it's coming back, but
right.
I'm talking about the original run. The original run, it went just a little bit longer, and I think it told a little bit more of an expansive story. Mm-hmm. There was just more in the universe, whereas Rebels had more of a narrow focus, I thought, but still, it really did follow the same parallel, where you actually it got a little bit deeper, it got a little darker, and it explored the characters a little bit more as time went on. But in the first season, particularly in the first half of the season, it was a little cartoony.
Yeah.
And maybe that's what Resistance is going to do. Maybe we shouldn't write it off as a kid's show just yet.
No, definitely. I think I'm definitely going to check it out. It comes out October 7th. And I think, I'll definitely check out the first couple episodes.
Well, we're going to check it out because it's Star Wars.
Right, I mean, we have to. Plus, we have to get on here and talk about it.
Absolutely. So, we have a podcast now, so we actually have to do these things.
Yeah, so we'll definitely, do our review, and I hope that you all watch it as well, and you can send in your comments and questions.
Yeah, let us know what you thought of the trailer.
Yeah.
We'd like to know what you thought of the trailer. And then, of course, when the show comes on, we'd love to talk to you guys about, what you thought about it and everything else. So what's our next segment? Man, I almost said topic again. I do that all the time.
Hey, well, you at least you caught it this time.
I did. I caught it this time, and I'm getting better.
See, growth. Today, the word is growth. So today, we're going to go into Duel of the Fates.
So what do we got on our Duel of the Fates?
Which is the better animated series, Clone Wars or Rebels?
Wow, we were just talking about
exactly.
All this.
See, perfect.
Yeah, we lead into this stuff. You would almost think we have show notes. Ooh. Yeah, which one's the better one? I don't know. I'm going to say probably Clone Wars. I'm going to say Clone Wars mostly because I think that the stories were a little bit stronger. I was going to say better, but I'm going to say stronger because there were some great stories in Rebels. There really were. And then, of course, Rebels had Thrawn. Mm-hmm. And definitely. Thrawn has long been one of my favorite characters. Now, I know a lot of people are saying that the reintroduction of Thrawn is not quite as strong as the EU version or what's now called Legends.
Right.
And I could see that. But at the same time, I think there's enough elements of Thrawn as we've known him. He's retained enough of his character that I think he's still the same fantastic character. And I think there's a lot more to explore with him. So I was really happy that Rebels actually introduced him, or I should say reintroduced him. Mm-hmm. But overall, and I think that a lot of you guys might agree that Clone Wars told more of the stories for the characters that we really wanted to know more.
Mm. Well, I think I would agree with you definitely that Clone Wars to me was the better animated series. My reason for it is, one, I love the animation. I think that the voice acting on the show was phenomenal and superb. I think that it focused more so on actual stories of characters from all sectors. So you had some episodes that were more politically driven, and then you had stuff that was more action-packed. You had things that where you got to see more the intimate depths of certain characters like Anakin and Ahsoka, their camaraderie. You got to see some things with Obi-Wan and Anakin. And then you got to see, a lot of times you got to see even things with droids. Like just the droids alone would kind of just go in their own thing.
There was that one story arc, remember, where C-3PO got trapped on that planet?
Yeah, and that was...
and I'm like, when is this... I mean, don't get me wrong, I didn't hate it, but I'm like, when is this going to end? I want to get back to the other characters,
Yeah, it went with like three episodes or 3 or 4 episodes, something like that.
It had to be at least that many.
Yeah, but I think that's what made Clone Wars really cool and dope, is because you had stories that span across the galaxy, and it kind of took you all over the place, and you didn't have to have the same people. So sometimes you will focus on just like Ahsoka will be on a mission, and sometimes you will bounce between Ahsoka, Anakin, and the clone troopers are like on the other side, and then sometimes you will just have...
That's true. You did have a lot of story arcs.
Yeah, a lot of...
And you did get to know the clone troopers themselves.
Yeah, as you know, you got to learn like the different heads of like Commander Cody and Rex and all those guys, and then
they became every bit as main characters to you as Anakin and Obi-Wan. Yeah,
I mean, just the fact that they would spend the whole thing on just what their training was like and how they got nicknames, Fives, things like that,
right.
Or Heavy, and those. I mean, that's just a part of the war, and that's the cool thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the things that I think was cool about the Clone Wars too, besides that you did get a lot of quiet moments, you got, the more intimate moments, was that you were introduced to a lot of new characters that ended up being fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
So who's your favorite? I was going to say like new character, but well, let's start there. If you had to pick your favorite characters in the Clone Wars, like I'll give you mine. One of the examples that I was talking about when I was making this point was Cad Bane.
Dang, you took mine.
Yeah.
Cad Bane, yes.
I mean, I love Cad Bane, and it's like the way he looks.
The look, his voice,
just and his the way action. He is.
Yeah, man, he's
one of those guys that I would like to see him in one of the movies.
Yeah, definitely.
It's like these are the guys, like they create these great characters,
and
then it's like, okay, can I get a novel? Could I get maybe a comic series? I don't know. There might have been, I have to admit that during the time the Clone Wars was on, I was aware of all the comics that were coming out, but I wasn't really following them.
Yeah.
And I know some of those guys did get their own series.
Well, I mean, even in like the Clone Wars, you had things that just focus on the Mandalorians, at some point, or you had something.
Yeah, I mean, it was different. It was different than Rebels.
Yeah, like Rebels focus a lot on the Mandalorians, but I mean, and they even brought some things from Clone Wars to Rebels, like,
right.
For example, Darth Maul, or that amazing fight scene with Palpatine.
Oh yeah,
that was. I
almost forgot about that.
That was crazy.
Yeah, there were a lot of moments in the Clone Wars. I mean, Rebels. To be fair, Rebels had that fantastic Darth Vader scene, right? And then there was the lightsaber duel between Ahsoka and Vader.
Of course, you can't forget the Inquisitors.
Right.
Who were freaky, the sister and, they were creepy. And then the Lothcat, that was kind of weird, but,
there was the Bendu or whatever.
The Bendu, yeah.
I mean, he was sort of the one that was introducing that balance between the light and the dark that you almost need both of them.
Yep.
And I mean, there's a lot of things. The whole Darth Maul story arc, I thought was just great. How he was almost acting as was acting as this weird anti-Yoda in a way.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, like I said, I think they're both excellent and well done shows, and Dave Filoni is.
Well, I'll tell you,
definitely gets kudos for all that he's done for those shows.
The guy is like the successor to Lucas, in my opinion. I mean, if they gave Star Wars to anybody, it should be him.
I would love to see him direct a live action movie, or at least a live action TV show to start off with. Because just because you can do animation doesn't necessarily mean you can direct actual actors to move about. But
yeah, I don't know. I mean, a lot of people make that argument, but I'm not entirely sure that's the case, only because a lot of times they talk about dealing with actors, but they have to deal with actors.
Well, yeah, they have to deal with them, but they're in more so
they're not
voice
blocking
capacity.
Well, yeah, but I mean, you have to think about it, though. It's a disconnect, to be sure, but they're directing the voice acting.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so they're getting the emotion and they're working with the actual actors at that point, but they are creating and blocking scenes.
True.
And they're doing an animation now. It's true in animation you can pretty much do whatever you imagine at this point.
Right.
So where I would think that an animation or like an animated series director might have issues is budget.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say, because even when I was watching some of the bonus footage on The Last Jedi, that's one of the things they kept trying to get Rian Johnson to understand, because Rian Johnson had so many ideas and so many things, and they had to find a way, like, look, we only got so much money to do this. So they had to either scrap some things or find other ways to do it. Like, one of the things in particular was the sea cow from The Last Jedi, where Luke went down and got the blue milk from that giant sea cow.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one of the things that, they had to figure out budget-wise, as far as, hey, do we make him animated? Do we create a live mock-up of him, or an animatronic? What are we going to do? What are we going to do with this?
Well, the problem with CGI is the fact that people sometimes forget. They're like, well, we'll just do it with CGI. And in some cases, it can save you a lot of money. Mm-hmm. In other cases, it can cost you quite a bit more money.
Yeah, because now you got to pay these guys all the time to do all this stuff.
Well, and it's like how much it costs to actually do it, and like the time involved and all that. And so sometimes it's actually more costly to do it CGI than it would be to just do it as a practical effect.
True.
So you have a good point. So I mean, on this one, I think we're both in agreement. Clone Wars
wins.
Yeah, Clone Wars wins.
Unanimous decision.
So now it's time to move on to our next segment that we lovingly call From a Certain Point of View.
Yes.
Now, this is essentially our featured topic, and this is, even though the way these podcasts are going, almost everything is a featured topic, and this is the one that we spend the most amount of time on, or at least this is the one that we want to highlight.
Trying to get to the most.
Yeah, we want to highlight. So today, we actually had the opportunity to visit the Power of Costume exhibit at the Detroit Institute of Arts.
Yeah, shout out to the Detroit Institute of Arts for hosting that event and exhibit. It was truly awesome. We got to see a lot of our favorite costumes from our favorite characters. It's a great exhibit, and if you are in the Detroit area, or if you plan on being in the Detroit area, you have until towards the end of September to go see it. So I highly recommend you go see it. Take your kids. It is a bit pricey, but it's definitely worth it.
Yeah, and if you go during the week.
Yeah.
Maybe on a Friday like what we did, because then it's not too crowded.
Yeah, I heard it can get pretty jam-packed in there.
Yeah, a friend of ours, Jim, he actually went, I think he went like on a Sunday or something, and he was just like, you could barely move in there, and it just wasn't, it wasn't really the best experience. And a lot of times that's the problem with these exhibits, is the fact that something like this, especially because, we saw this,
mm-hmm.
If there's too many people around it, you really can't enjoy it. You can't get too close.
Yeah.
And I thought that it was really hilarious, too, because you had those couple of people that were just sort of reaching a little too close, and the alarm would go off.
Exactly.
And then you'd have the DIA guys just, like, going
Swarming up like, hey.
Yeah, like, hey. Because, they don't know what they're trying to do. Is it accidental, or are they really trying to grab, like, Boba Fett's helmet or something?
Yeah, and so just to kind of give you a glimpse of what we saw, they have giant mock-ups of costumes from all of Queen Amidala's garbs that she wore in the prequels.
Man, I know. Didn't that take up like 1/3 of the...
Yeah, man. I mean, half of it.
I was just like, dude, every room I go in, it's another Amidala outfit. I'm like, okay, I know she wore a lot of outfits, but this is getting a little out of hand.
Yeah, I mean, she had like as many outfits as Lando had capes. So,
well, what was your favorite thing there?
My favorite one was... well, I'm a dark side guy anyway. In the Empire, I love them. Mm-hmm. So don't judge me. So I think of course, Vader, the Empire, and the Empire, actually all the military stuff, because I'm a military guy anyway. So I love the military. So that's kind of my thing. But I did really enjoy looking at like Boba Fett and Jango. Those costumes.
Yeah, those costumes were
sweet.
Extremely detailed.
Yeah, they had so much detail in them, and
to just stand. I mean, I really felt this way about a lot of the exhibits that were there, but to actually stand a couple of feet away and see in person these iconic costumes, and they were actually movie-worn costumes, by the way. These weren't just replicas or, things that were created specifically for this exhibit. I mean, this was actual costumes worn by the actors in the films.
Yeah.
And so to see the Boba Fett and the Jango Fett costumes, mind-blowing.
Yeah, they had Darth Maul there. They had all the different Jedi roles from Luke Skywalker's to Mace Windu to even some of the female Jedi. They had the droids. That was another cool one.
That was
seeing R2D2. Yeah, and all
and
like
3PO,
the little,
like in person.
Yeah, even in BB-8, and they actually had the little arm compartments that would come out of R2. So that was really cool. And we'll definitely post these pictures.
Yeah, I was going to say we took a bunch of pictures, and we will post pictures so you guys can see it. They should be up by the time this thing, is available for you guys to listen to. We'll have the pictures up, but it was really phenomenal. Now, again, you gave me like about 10 things. What was your favorite one?
It's
like,
hard
my favorite one was like these 20, because it's tough. I mean, I could tell you, the stuff that I enjoyed everything that you mentioned. Seeing the stormtroopers, I thought was cool. The different stormtrooper outfits.
Yeah.
The Han Solo.
Well, yeah, of course, that's your
was
favorite.
especially because you also have to understand, not only is Han Solo my favorite character, and this is somewhat of an unrelated thing, by the way, but Harrison Ford actually became my favorite actor, or at least he was my favorite actor for a long time, and I can probably still say he still is. But it wasn't because of Star Wars or Indiana Jones. I mean, that started it. But the thing that actually made me really admire him as an actor, there was a movie that came out in 1985 called The Mosquito Coast. And it was incredible. And it was the first time I had ever seen, because, Han Solo and Indiana Jones they're a little, they're not really similar, but they're still an action-oriented,
you can
over
see a
the
thread.
top.
You can see a thread there.
There's a commonality between the two of them, in a way. But The Mosquito Coast, he played a completely different character. And it was really, it just opened my mind to his range. And, I don't know, for some reason I just latched onto him. So seeing his costume, his actual movie-worn costume was just mind-blowing to me. Like you said, seeing the droids, seeing the Emperor's robe.
Yep.
I know that was huge. Oh, yeah.
As a Chancellor all the way up to he became Palpatine.
And, of course, Darth Vader and everything. But man, it really is tough to pick a favorite, though.
I think the coolest thing that I saw was, and I want to say Vader. I really want to say Vader because who doesn't love Vader? But,
well, yeah, you're seeing the iconic villain of all time, and I keep wanting to say stage worn, a film worn costume. That's just.
But I think what was the most amazing thing to see was Yoda. The actual puppet of Yoda, like that was really cool.
I have to say, I was pretty stunned by that too.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting that one, and that was really cool just to see the actual. And it's exactly how you see it in the movie, just about. So
absolutely,
yeah, it was just crazy.
And the lighting. I have to give a shout out to the lighting.
The lighting, yeah.
I mean, it didn't help when they're like, okay, you can't take pictures with a flash or whatever. So I'm like, oh, great. But I mean, so the pictures might not necessarily all be the greatest, but the lighting was so good and so dramatic, and actually, and then of course, and they had a bunch of other stuff. They did have the slave Leia bikini.
Yes. For all the guys.
Every guy wants to see that. So that was good. They had a lot of stuff. Now here's a question for you.
Okay.
What didn't they have that you would like to have seen?
Well, they definitely didn't have Kylo Ren, so that would have been cool to see.
Yeah.
And,
well, I could tell you, I was a little disappointed that they didn't. And I mean, again, I know they only have so much space.
Right.
They can't dedicate the entire museum to these exhibits, and I'm sure if they could, they would. But I would have liked to have seen some of the variations. Like talking about Han Solo, right? I would have liked to have seen the Bespin outfit. I would have liked to have seen the Hoth outfit.
Right, okay, I got you.
Some of Luke's variations, although they had a couple, but...
Yeah. I think If I had to pick, well, if that's the case, you want to go with variations. They really didn't have much of Leia's because you still had
That's true.
Leia when she was on Endor. Then you had Leia,
The Bespin Leia.
the Bespin Leia, or Hoth Leia. So
Did they even have?
they had New Hope Leia in the all white. That was the only one.
All right, that's right. Because that was, I remember seeing that.
Yeah, because they wanted to make sure that she looked pure as a princess, and that was the whole thing. And that's really the cool thing. And for those of you, when you do go...
Pure as a princess, they had her slave Leia bikini. I don't necessarily know if they were omitting anything.
Well, let's just say at the beginning.
Like they didn't want to hit you with it?
Yeah, but by the time she met that scoundrel Han Solo, things might have changed.
Yeah, a little bit. Who knows
what happened on that Falcon? Hey,
what happens on the Falcon stays on the Falcon.
Words to live by.
Exactly. But I mean, I thought it was a really good exhibit that, and again, I can't say enough about how much I would encourage people to go to that.
Oh, I know one.
Oh, we're still trying to get your favorite thing, right?
Well, I got my favorite thing, but you asked me what other outfit, costume that I wanted to see. Lando.
Oh, right.
I mean, the man has like a million capes, so like we didn't get to see not one.
Well, that whole, especially the Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't have even mind, speaking of variations, what about, what was the name of that? Here we go. We do this every time. You know what? No matter how much research we do before these podcasts, there's always something we bring up that I always forget. And it's not that I didn't know. Mm-hmm. I just can't remember off the top of my head at the moment. But when they were in Jabba's palace, that bounty hunter, that outfit,
actually,
which was in Solo. Did they?
Yeah. Yep,
I missed it?
Yep, I have the picture right here. I'll show it to you after the show.
No way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, I missed that.
Moving too fast.
Well,
man.
then I retract my disappointment. Watch. There's probably going to be people writing in, going, well, when I went, I saw the Hoth thing, and
what the heck
it's probably like some whole wing that we didn't see that has everything that we're talking about.
Right.
Completely discrediting us.
So I have a question for you.
Uh-oh.
So
I don't know if I like that.
So because it's the power of costumes, how much did the costumes affect your enjoyment of the actual films?
I think actually in a lot of ways, and it's funny that you bring that up because I wanted to talk about the costumes, not just, from a perspective of character, and we actually addressed this on one of our previous podcasts where we were talking about the fabrics, the attention to detail, the craftsmanship behind them.
All right.
And they had displays on that, by the way. They had some of the fabrics they use. And of course, you did the audio thing. Yeah. Or they gave you like a little audio tour or something.
Yeah, it's like this little device that you can wear. And when you type in a number code under the exhibit, it'll give you an audio.
Yeah, like additional information.
Audio information about that and kind of like in more of a entertaining, dramatic kind of flair. So that was kind of cool.
And I mean, we know that they have a lot of history online. They tell you, I used to buy a lot of the books, The Essential Guide to Whatever back in the day, and they would just go into really, there was one, I wish I can remember what book it was, but there was one where they went into huge detail about the costumes, how they were made. Mm-hmm. It was almost like, you do this and you can probably make one after you read this book. Mm-hmm. So from that perspective, and the costumes, every bit as much as the music, to me, actually increased my enjoyment of the movies. It's, to me, what separates Star Wars from a lot of the other sci-fi or fantasy films is that there's two things. One, the costumes are just better made than even in the original trilogy when, the first one, before George had more money than he knew what to do with. I mean, they spent a lot in the costumes, and there was a lot of ingenuity. Yeah. What they made R2 out of, and a lot of this stuff didn't exist. I mean, when you hear about how they made lightsabers, and they're just using, parts like, well, here's part of like an electric razor that we'll use. And
as a hilt. Right?
Yeah, and we'll paint this, and we'll do that. And so there's a lot of that. And that was one thing that separated from them. And then, of course, another is that they weren't cliched. They weren't the same type of costume that you see in other sci-fi fantasy. And that's where I think that it was able to, I was able to get lost in the Star Wars universe even more so, because if you take into consideration everything about Star Wars, you have the music, you have the characters, you have the costumes, you have this mind-blowing, innovative technology and shooting style and different things that they were doing, and you factor it all into one, everything enhances the experience.
Yeah, one hand washes the other, essentially. And the cool thing I loved about Star Wars is, and like you were saying, is the innovation that was brought into the characters. Is even reading some of the descriptions of what they were going through, or some of the first drafts of the costumes, what they originally were going to start off as. And
George like when you look at like what Darth Maul looked like before.
Yeah, he looked like some weird grunge rocker.
Yeah.
And then, don't get me wrong, the end result was amazing. He looks like he's from Hellraiser, but just reading some of the things that George Lucas said, like he wanted Darth Vader to look like this Dark Lord riding in the wind, and just his descriptions of what, and his vision of what he wanted this iconic character to look like, and then how it progressed from one stage with the samurai style helmet, and how he borrowed from different cultures and things. So Star Wars is an amalgamation of a lot of different things, and and George Lucas got inspired by so much. That's what makes Star Wars so cool, is because it really does show being cultured, going to different places, seeing different things can inspire you to create your own world. And that's exactly what he did with costumes.
Yeah. And can you imagine getting the directions from him? Just some of these wacky.
I need a samurai helmet that's spray painted black.
It's
what?
Beyond even that. It's kind of like, I'm thinking something, probably just like these weird descriptive things that mean nothing. And it's kind of like, well, I don't even know what that means.
Right.
What is it that you want?
Like the Jedi robes were based off Japanese kimonos. Like that's.
Yeah, it'd be like, well, I kind of want a Japanese kimono, but make it crunchy or something, just some weird description or something that, it's a descriptive term that, of course, in his head makes perfect sense. But to convey that.
And trying to get him to an artist to actually understand what that means.
But I'll tell you what, though. Here's the thing. Of course, we haven't done that because we ran and saw the exhibit, and now we're recording this podcast. But for the rest of you, for all of you who are not us, after you see the exhibit, go back to the prequel trilogy DVDs or Blu-rays or whatever and look at the bonus features.
Mm-hmm.
Because it actually shows one of the things, the whole re-release of even the original trilogy, they did the same thing where they had all these insane bonus features. And one of the things that they show is Lucas's process where they would have a bunch of pictures up on a board, and he would put check marks or X's or whatever on what he liked, and okay, this is good, go with that, and let's move on to something else.
Actually, one of the things, if he really liked it, he would stamp it. He had a stamp that said Fabuloso.
Oh, right. Yep.
I learned that today, see?
There you go.
Learn something new every day.
All right, well, I think it's time to move on to our next segment, which, of course, is Clear Your Mind.
Yes, we have to clear our minds, and that means we get to ask all the questions that we want for at least this podcast.
Yeah, so you guys basically send us questions, and then we talk about them. Because, again, this isn't the typical type of a show where, we're some Hollywood heavyweight journalist or something, and we have all this inside information. We are fairly knowledgeable fans, of course, but it's really more of like a discussion thing. You ask a question and it causes us to discuss it. And in theory, you're entertained by this. So the first one comes to actually a very good friend of mine. He's a guitar player for Circle the Crown. And I used to play in a band with him called Bloodline Riot and a bunch of zillion other bands. It's a great guitar player, Jason Caine. He, of course, is a huge Star Wars fan, just like I am. And he submitted this question. What's your thoughts on the background of Snoke? Where did he come from? Who the heck is he, and how did he come to power of the First Order? And these are all very good questions because This is the stuff that's on the mind of virtually every Star Wars fan since The Force Awakens came out.
Yep.
I mean, we had all kinds of stuff going. There was a point where everybody thought he might be Darth Plagueis.
Everybody thought he was Mace Windu.
Yeah, right, because after he fell off or something, he was all scarred and disfigured, and that's how he would look. And, there were some people that thought maybe he was Palpatine, like a clone or something. And
Yep. Well, I think that, and I hope that we can get some answers in 9 from that, to answer those questions. I think, if I do recall correctly, there's some talk, and I believe a book, where Palpatine felt like he was getting summoned or he felt a presence from the Outer Rim.
Yeah, that was in the whole Aftermath trilogy. They set that up before the Battle at Jakku. It's one of the things that led, actually, Jakku was supposed to be like the Empire's last stand. If anything happened to him, everything was supposed to move to Jakku, and there'd be this whole last battle or something. And then, but yeah, through the whole thing, the books talk about how through the time of what would be the original trilogy, and maybe before, I don't know if any of you guys that read the book, you can, comment or whatever, but it was essentially where, yeah, he felt some presence, some dark side presence calling him from, the Outer Rim. And, well, actually, no, the Unknown Regions. Yeah. Yeah, it's basically like where Thrawn came from.
Okay.
It's like in that area. And so that's what made the Thrawn thing so interesting, is that it seems like perhaps we find out that when Thrawn came, he gave him some information. So there are some people, that think that maybe Snoke is somebody who came from there, and he might have been one of the people that, or the person that was calling out to Palpatine. Because it wasn't just that Palpatine felt this force, it was calling to him.
Right.
And so he became obsessed with finding out who or what this was, partially out of curiosity, partially because if something was going to challenge his power.
Yeah, he wanted to know about it.
He wanted to know about it, learn from him, and then destroy him. So my thinking is that he probably came from the Unknown Regions. He's probably the one that was calling out to Palpatine. And because he seemed to know a lot about Vader, he seemed to know a lot about Anakin. What's interesting is he knows all about Solo. He knows all about Skywalker.
Mm-hmm.
This is a guy that's obviously versed on that same history.
And let's not forget that, he's the master of, well, at least unto his untimely death, the master of mind control and mind games, simply because...
Yeah, too bad he wasn't the master of mind reading. He might still be alive today.
Well, yeah, I think just Kylo flipped the script on him a little bit.
Well, do you think he's going to come back in 9?
I don't think so. I think Snoke is gone. I think Snoke was just a point to get us to Kylo taking full power.
But see, that's the thing that is just so... That's the thing about JJ I don't quite understand, and we won't know until 9, is because why introduce a character like this? Now, granted, this goes back to a criticism that we've had of the way that Lucasfilm and Disney are handling all this, is that it seems like instead of having a set plan, like, okay, we're going to start here, we're going to end here, and then you guys can all just, however you get us there, but these are the beats that you have to hit for each movie.
Right.
Instead of doing that, it's more like, okay, you're done with 7? Okay, well, what do you got for 8? Where do you want to take us?
Well, I think, here's my thing, and I think that because, in this, I think it goes on both sides, because with Snoke being gone, I think that allows for Kylo to rise up. And I think that's why I said the Knights of Ren, I think they're trying to create a whole new thing because, at one point, Luke didn't believe in the Jedi Order anymore. He didn't want to do it. He believed in it at one point, and then once Kylo happened, he kind of got rid of that. Mm-hmm. And I think even because with him shutting himself off from the Force, that created the need for Rey. Because Luke shut himself off, and then you had this dark side presence. Now you need someone to challenge that, like Snoke said.
So you're basically, your whole opinion is that Snoke was really like a bridge. He was a character that was getting us from point A, where we were after the original trilogy ended, to point B, where we need to get to
Right.
in order to complete the journey of Kylo.
Right.
Why Rey was necessary.
I think that's where the whole thrust of this whole new trilogy is, because if you look at the beats of it, as you said, all right, we have all the heroes that survived. We had Han, we had Leia, we had Luke. All right, well, 2 of those characters have now transitioned to that magical place in the Force. So, and one in actual life, being sadly being Carrie Fisher. But if you would look at it, it's like, okay, well, the heroes had people to guide them. But who did Kylo have to guide him to the dark? So you had to create someone to help him on that path, because Vader's gone, Palpatine's gone. There's no one else. So you have to create somebody else who has the ability to take Kylo and put him in a position or lead him down that path so he can grow into whomever he's supposed to be. And I think that's who Rey has to challenge in the end. And so now I think at 9, that's what we're getting to, is that now they both have to kind of figure out how they're going to combat each other, because they've already kind of had a little Vulcan mind meld, if you will, with each other. So
yeah, and it's going to be interesting to see what they do with that, because here's the thing. It's like Snoke obviously started that. He admitted it as much, right? So he created that and in essence gave them that power, but then they were able to continue to do it even after Snoke was gone. So it's interesting to see, 1, why did he do this? 2, where is that going to go?
I think that's just to keep the battle going. I think that's just...
Well, yeah, that part I think is more or less obvious, but you just got to wonder.
And I think that maybe that's how Luke is going to guide Rey to break that bond, because she's going to have to in order to defeat Kylo. Because remember, in the original trilogy, Luke didn't want to face Vader again, because he's like, I can't kill my own father. And so even though, so far as we know, Rey and Kylo have no lineage to each other or any ties, but the only tie that they do have is that, I don't want to say spiritual tie or force tie that they have to each other. So maybe Rey feels like, I can't kill Kylo because that'll be killing me too.
It could be. I mean, the one thing that I've noticed about this new trilogy, and even a lot of the new novels, is they're really exploring this idea of, it used to be where if you're a light side guy, you would never go to the dark, you would never do any of that, and vice versa. Now it's like they're sort of, everybody's exploring a little of everything.
Well, once again, I think I look at Star Wars as something that's indicative of society. It always kind of mirrors society in some way, shape, or form. And I think that's where we are currently, in that no one wants to be labeled as, oh, I'm just this, I'm that. Everybody kind of wants to be free to kind of do their own thing. And Kylo said as much, even in Last Jedi. He said, forget that. Forget everything that everyone, just do you. Do whatever you want to do.
Well, I think it is going to be really interesting. And it's going to be interesting to see where, because, the other thing that Jason points out, it's not just who Snoke is how did he rise as part of the First Order? How did he become the leader of the First Order? And that's...
Yeah, I think that's where
it almost has to have like a tie somehow to Palpatine, because there's 30 years between Force Awakens and Return of the Jedi. That time period actually is about 30 years. So somewhere in there, Snoke had to come, and you've pointed out too that, Han and Leia know who Snoke is.
Well, I believe that Snoke, at one point, much like Palpatine, I think he rose up in the political ranks. I think because he represented maybe that foreign region, or that way out in the abyss somewhere. He was that representative for those people.
Well, that's true. I mean, when we see Palpatine, he's just a senator from Naboo.
Exactly.
So who's this guy, right?
Yeah, but I think he's the one that's like, okay, he realized, and I think that's what they... on the, if you want to say the bad guy side or the dark side, I think what they kind of realized is that, okay, Palpatine and Vader had it right. They just didn't execute it correctly in their mind, maybe. So maybe they just feel like, okay, we'll take what they've started, much like what Kylo said, and I'm going to finish what you started. Now, what that means, that could be anything.
Well, and it really depends on whether or not Snoke is truly from the unknown regions or not. Because if he is... and he possesses some sort of dark side superpower or something that was actually calling out to Palpatine. If Palpatine ended up connecting with him before his death, there might have been a transitory...
Yeah, he might have placed him. Like, hey, look, in case something happens to me... Yeah.
You're good. So
you're my guy. Like, you're... Help me, Snoke. You're my only hope.
Yeah, exactly. He's got that whole thing in some sort of dark R2 unit or something. Well, our next question comes from Mark Adler. Mark is another good friend of ours in the video production realm. He actually runs the Michigan Production Alliance, or at least he's one of the key people from it. So if you're a production guy and you're in Michigan Production Alliance, look it up on Google. They got I think it's mpami.org or something like that. See, once again, if only I did research, right? But anyway, Mark writes, what's the background on Chewbacca's home planet?
Good old Kashyyyk.
Yes, Kashyyyk. Spelled with 3 Y's, by the way.
Yep.
So basically, it's kind of a forest type of a world.
Yeah, the huge. Just picture like a planet full of like giant sycamore sequoia trees, like these huge.
Yeah, the giant trees. You can almost actually think of it as Endor on steroids.
Yeah.
And actually, that's what ended up happening because, and we were reminded of it earlier when it was basically in Return of the Jedi, Chewbacca, or not Chewbacca, but Wookiees in general were supposed to be what the Ewoks were.
Yeah, they were supposed to be what the Ewoks were in Return of the Jedi.
Yeah, but what ended up happening was Lucas then changed his mind, created Endor, created the Ewoks, which were essentially little Wookiees.
Yeah. Baby infant Wookiees.
Like little tiny,
fun-size Wookiees.
Yeah, fun-size porg-like Wookiees or something. And that's the thing, is that it's interesting because now Kashyyyk was featured in Revenge of the Sith.
It was.
I mean, it was brief, and it wasn't exactly what Lucas wanted to do, as we were talking about earlier, budget constraints and everything. But but that's basically what ended up happening, was they had a battle with the clones and the Separatists.
Yeah, you can see that scene on, like I said, like Eric said, on Revenge of the Sith, and it's basically when Order 66 takes place. Yoda's there, and they have this whole raging battle that's going on, and they're helping the clone troopers. And then, of course, the clone troopers turn on the Jedi, and Yoda has to decapitate a few clone troopers.
Yeah, and then, of course, he has that touching goodbye scene with Tarful and Chewbacca before he goes off to Dagobah. So, I mean, that's actually... I mean, Kashyyyk actually plays a really, really important role. Now, the interesting bit of trivia is the first time we're introduced to Kashyyyk is the Star Wars Holiday Special.
Yeah, definitely. And the other thing is that's kind of rumored to be in Episode 9, that they think that, one of the places that they may be going to is Kashyyyk, because they're trying to rebuild the Rebel Alliance, and they need people, and they think that Chewbacca may go back to Kashyyyk.
Well, here's a question for you. Do you think that the Resistance is actually going to go back to calling themselves the Rebel Alliance?
No, I think they're.
I'm on the Q&A.
No, I think they're going to.
Eric Vancil writes.
I think they're still going to be considered the Resistance.
I think so too.
I think that's kind of something they stuck with, and I think it's going to, pan out for them. And I think the Rebel Alliance, that was of yesteryear. So I think the new thing is the Resistance.
Well, I think the good news is, Mark, you're probably going to get a lot more background on Chewbacca's home planet in the next movie.
Yeah, I mean, there's speculations that they may go back to Endor, Kashyyyk, or...
Yeah, who knows? I mean, they do say they're going to tie up the trilogy.
Yeah, and that would be a good way to do it, so it should be interesting.
Yeah, well, I guess this would be a good way to tie up our show.
Absolutely.
What do you think? All right, I'm Eric Vancil.
I'm Darryl Sanders.
May the Force be with you.
Always.
Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter @HeadToHeadSW. Submit your questions for our next show. Visit our official website at headtoheadswpodcast.com. Until next time, may the Force be with you, always.